On the letter, I want to say that the United States Congress has no vendetta to go against the Nepal people or to work against their best interests, just the opposite. The letter that was sent by members of the Land Trust Human Rights Commission is an expression of their concern also for the Tibetan refugees. And this is this issue of refugee settlement in the United States is a long-standing issue. President Bush first offered that as a possibility for Nepal. It is at no cost, of course, to the Nepal government. And it would be a way of dealing with those Tibetans, especially those Tibetans who lack status in Nepal. There was, the Nepal government has given resident certificates to Tibetans up through 1989 and then stopped
Yes.
giving those. Again, the Tibetans are feeling increasingly vulnerable because of the pressure, perceived or real, and real both, on this community from China. So, if you have made the decision at some point in your life to flee oppression, to leave your homeland, the thought of being returned forcibly back or being vulnerable to the machinations of that oppressive government is a very terrifying proposition for these people. And they are seeking either a regularization of their status in Nepal or a way out.
So, as an independent observer, don't you think that if the refugee issue in Nepal is settled by a third-party intermediary, for example, US or Canada or any other interested parties are interested to take the refugees who are languishing in Nepal, so the headache of Chinese government will be over, don't you think so? Why would China be wanting the refugees to be there in Nepal?
Well, let me first say that I believe very strongly that there is a goodwill, a base of goodwill, and a historic and cultural base between the Nepali and Tibetans themselves.
Communities, yes.
So I would really like to see the situation to return to the kind of situation where the Tibetan people and the Nepali people themselves were having these discussions that did not require or incentivize either the involvement of the People's Republic of China or the involvement of the US government. This really is a very precious historic relation between the Tibetans and the Nepalis. Unfortunately, one of the last things that King Gyanendra did was close the office of the representative of His Holiness the Dalai Lama that had existed in Kathmandu since
59.
Exactly, and the Tibetan Welfare Office, which was the community office that attended to needs, grievances, and all sorts of community issues. Without those representatives there is no authority, there is no means to have this direct relationship between the Nepalese and the Tibetans. And I think that reopening that office or finding some means of having direct conversation is the best means. Now, the involvement of China is so politically loaded. China has a very oppressive policy in Tibet. We are seeing just over the weekend 2 more Tibetans who set themselves ablaze, self-immolated, making the total 25 now. It's a terrible situation. This is not the kind of dimension that Nepal needs to bring into its relationship with the Nepal people, I believe. The United States is offering a way out by saying, we will take this community off your hands if this community is a problem for you. But China does not want the world to think that it has a problem with Tibet. It doesn't want the world to think that there are refugees who are fleeing oppression. Indeed, China would say these people are illegal migrants, or these people are economic migrants. It will not admit that people are fleeing, that Tibetans are fleeing oppression inside Tibet. So it's a very politically loaded issue for the Chinese to say to Nepal, yes, go ahead and resettle these refugees in a third country.
It could just be Chinese government just could be mum whenever the US or any other third party intermediary will settle the case with Nepal government.
Yes, it could. Yes, it could be mum, but China has a Tibet problem. It clearly has a Tibet problem. And that Tibet problem is leaking out through the Himalayan passes into Nepal, through Tibet, through Nepali territory to India.
Yeah.
It would like to stop that flow. So again, I go back to this what I think is the fundamental need, which is for the Nepal civil society, the Nepal people, to look at these issues, to look at the issues of their Tibetan brothers and sisters more closely, and to find a way to mediate these problems between Nepalis and Tibetans without the interference of these two great powers.
How should Nepal government diplomatically approach to the Chinese and US diplomatic community to solve this problem? What would be your suggestion?
Well, I would do two things. I would find a way to reestablish unofficially, if that's required, and I think at this stage it would be honestly required, to unofficially reestablish a representative of the Office of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, the Central Tibetan Administration, the Tibetan Welfare Office. There needs to be a greater understanding and a working relationship between the Nepalis and the Tibetans themselves. Number one, most important. Secondly, I would urge the Nepali media to look at this issue, to spend more time speaking with Tibetans, to have a thorough understanding of what the issues are in a depoliticized way, not as a spokesman for any particular interest, especially the Chinese government, but really do some investigation of what's going on in these communities in a safe way that would not put Tibetans at risk for speaking frankly. Then I would encourage other elements of Nepal civil society, human rights organizations, community organizations also, to make an effort to bring in Tibetans to understand this issue better. So that I think is the most important thing. A new resurgent effort to connect with the Tibetans, Nepali-Tibetan relationship. On the resettlement of Tibetan refugees, there's certainly a successful model. All the players are in place. They've resettled many, many thousands of Bhutanese refugees. This process is still going on. The international organizations involved in the resettlement are in place. It should be quite simple to feed in select Tibetans into this group as well in a very kind of well-managed, organized way. These kinds of refugee resettlement programs are conducted all over the world, and Nepal should cooperate and allow Tibetans who feel that they have no future in Nepal to leave. And I think it would probably ease some of the tension within the Tibetan communities themselves and with regard to China, as you pointed out.
So I had met one Tibetan refugee who had lived in Nepal since 1986.
Yes.
And he is in New York now, and then he had a very difficult